What's going on, everyone? We've got the 2021 season in review for the Denver Broncos with 7-10, fourth place in the AFC West, including two more losses to the Las Vegas Raiders. Overall, is an interesting season in that it seemed like they were trying to go into full rebuild mode, trading Von Miller, but a 7-10 record is nothing to sneeze at. For their fantasy relevant players, Drew Lock was a non-factor. We're going to talk about Drew Lock instead of Teddy Bridgewater, just because I'm seeing more talk that Drew Lock may be re-signed by the Broncos, so we'll be able to get into that. Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon were very close, RB19, RB21, sort of that dual threat. But out of the backfield, Cortez Sutton, a wide receiver 49, and Noah Fant at tight end 14. Starting with Drew Lock, he was relegated to the second string quarterback, really only came in due to injury emergency. Looking at him as a possible bridge quarterback for the Broncos, I certainly don't think he'll be the long-term option. I think his potential is pretty much wrapped in with that hilarious fumble he had. He was really largely ineffective, even with all the offensive firepower, and that is what is mostly shocking. When you look at the weapons, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, both good running backs. You have the wide receiver core, Cortez Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick came on a little bit at the end of the year, but even when you add in Noah Fant, you really expect more from a quarterback who has all those options, and it seems like Drew Lock doesn't quite have it. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Broncos proceed next year and years after, because it may be a situation where Drew Lock is sort of a placeholder while they look for that franchise quarterback. From a fantasy perspective, we're sticking with leaving Drew Lock on the waiver wire. We're not picking him up unless it was a dire emergency where somehow your starting quarterback headed back up, your QB1 all got injured and or they're suspended or something odd that would force you to really scrape sort of the bottom of the fantasy barrel to try and get Drew Lock. On the flip side, though, Javonte Williams looks full of potential. The split backfield really limited his potential breakout. I know it was a sort of a running joke on fantasy Twitter that next game was going to be his breakout game, or no, it's going to be the next game. And despite showing flashes of talent and ability, just being stuck in that two-person backfield really limits the upside. But I do expect him to approach a larger role moving into the next season. Really, their off-season approach determines that as well. If they re-sign Melvin Gordon, we're looking at sort of a similar situation, although I think Javonte Williams gets an upgrade moving into next season, just getting more experience, and Melvin Gordon another year. As running backs age, they get less and less carries, less and less effective with their carries. So I think even if Melvin Gordon's re-signed, Javonte Williams sees a bigger role than last year. However, if they don't re-sign Melvin Gordon, then he is an immediate running back one, and a potential high fantasy draft choice. I think right now, with the possibility that they re-sign Melvin Gordon, that he's really a high upside fringe RB1, which is a good position to be in, and that really comes from his potential, and his broken tackle percentage was extremely high. So he's breaking tackles and he's getting the extra yards, which really pays dividends, if the line is able to improve in Denver. Melvin Gordon, as I mentioned, there's a good possibility he returns to the Broncos, and I think it would be not diminished to the point where he's not playing, but he's going to get less and less carries or receiving out of the backfield just due to age, and that's just the nature of the position. I misspelled landing spot, but we're going to leave it. I think regardless of his landing spot, he's a solid RB2 based on the high volume of goal line work. That's really something that salvaged a lot of games for him fantasy-wise on the Broncos, was his use on the goal line, and he was really effective in using that position. So I think regardless of if the Broncos re-sign him, he still will be seeing that goal line work, which sort of limits Javonte Williams' upside a little bit. And if he gets picked up somewhere else, I still think he's going to be an effective goal line running back. And we're going to ignore the misspelling on landing spot. Cortez Sutton, I really think this is an issue of the receiving upside limited by the quarterback play. He has a large contract, and continued improvement from that injury. He looked good at the beginning of the season. It was kind of interesting where he tailed off at the end of the season, rather than starting slow, returning from that injury. But that's something where we don't really know 100% how an injury will affect a player throughout the season. It can impact their strength, their ability to recover from games. As so a little bit more time in between the injury and his next game, I think, will actually be a huge benefit to him. The other issue is a lot of targets to split on that offense. I mentioned a lot of the names: Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick came on out of nowhere. Noah Fant will always be getting some targets as well as a tight end. So he's really a likely wide receiver 3, and that's kind of where all of those Broncos receivers are in that mix. It could be a situation where, if you have one or two, you hope you pick the correct one that you're playing on a week-to-week basis. Last, Noah Fant. There's not a lot to say. He's pretty much the epitome of the tight end position, where everybody going into the season thinks this is the year. He's going to be a tier 2 tight end after the Kelseys, Wallers, Andrews. That's going to be Noah Fant, and it really doesn't have the ability to continue those games from one to the next. Boom or bust. He did have 7 double-digit games, but he also had a few goose eggs where he only had 1 or 2 points, and these are all PPR. A new quarterback could improve his standing. The secret is I'm adding in these misspellings to get some engagement. If you find any more spelling mistakes, drop them in the comments below. Again, he remains a high upside tight end based on his athleticism and ability, and that's sort of where a lot of these tight ends outside of the top tier are. You're just sort of taking a flyer and hoping that this is their year that they break out. And it could be, it could not be, and a lot of it depends on who's quarterbacking the Denver Broncos next year. Some of the goals for the Broncos in 2022. I think they should get an offensive-minded coach. I don't necessarily know if they've been linked to, Eric Bieniemy or Pep Hamilton, but I think they would go a long way in sort of sorting out that offense, which has a lot of weapons and a lot of firepower there, that really just needs to be utilized well and correctly. Solution at quarterback is another big question mark. Drew Lock is the bridge quarterback, which it may be re-sign him. Maybe they trade for Rodgers. Maybe they draft a quarterback they believe in, though it's not a strong quarterback class. Maybe they see someone who they think can excel, or maybe they wait a year or two until they see someone who's sort of a no question quarterback in the future. They really have to continue to grow the defense. The defense has always been a strong point in the Denver organization, and with trading Von Miller, it's almost just a reload situation where that you get rid of a top tier player, you have to bring someone in to replace him. Online improvement, offensive line improvement could help both running backs, quarterbacks, whoever they are. It could be Rodgers, could be Locke, and wide receivers. They were really middle of the pack in run blocking, and they were at the bottom of the pack in the low 20s of sacks allowed. So any additional time can really just only benefit the offense. So if they focus on the offensive line, maybe Drew Lock does excel, and they don't need Aaron Rodgers. But I think that's certainly a sticking point that would be able to help Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon at the very least, especially with Javonte Williams' broken tackle percentage. If he keeps breaking the tackles, and he does that a couple yards further down from the line of scrimmage than he has been with a little better blocking that can only help yards and explosive plays. So overall, it may have seemed like a down season for the Denver Broncos, but there's just a couple issues that need to be sorted out, and they are right back into contending for the AFC West.